What if you could step back in time? I mean, not just read about history, but actually hear it from someone who was there. Well, today we get to do something pretty close. We're opening up the memoir of Shubael Seaver, a man who literally watched the 17th century become the 18th. His story is this incredible window into colonial America.
Okay, so picture this. It's the winter of 1729. There's a fire crackling, and an old man, Shubael Seaver, gathers his grandkids around him. He's 90 years old, and he feels this urgency to tell them, and, to tell us, about the world that made him. These are his words, his life. So let's meet the man himself. This is Shubael Seaver. He was a wheelwright from a little settlement called Roxbury. Now, his life wasn't about fame or fortune, but that's what makes it so special. It's the perfect way to see how a nation was born, one family, one person at a time. To really get Shubael, you have to understand his world. He was born way back in 1640, and at that point, his hometown of Roxbury was only 10 years old. This wasn't some established city. No, this was the edge of the wilderness, a place where your survival absolutely depended on hard work, your neighbors, and your faith. So here's his life, in a nutshell. Born into a brand new world in 1640, starts working as a boy, gets married, raises a whole family, and, amazingly, lives long enough to sit down and tell his grandkids all about it. Let's dive into some of these milestones. At just 14 years old. Think about that. The age we're just starting high school. Shubael's entire life path was basically set. He became an apprentice. And this wasn't some summer job, okay? This was a full-on legal commitment. He would live with and work for a master craftsman, learning the trade that would define the rest of his life. It's so easy to hear a job title like wheelwright and just kind of gloss over it. But let's stop for a second. In a world with no paved roads, no cars, really no easy way to move things around, a good wheelwright wasn't just a craftsman. He was the key to everything. He was essential. So what did that job actually take? I mean, just look at this process. This wasn't just woodworking. It was high-tech engineering for the 1600s. Every single piece of wood was chosen for a specific reason. Everything had to be shaped just so. And that last step, shrinking a red-hot iron tire onto the wooden wheel, that created an incredibly strong bond. Like Shubael said himself, a bad wheel could put a man in grave difficulty. His work had serious real-world consequences. But of course, a life is always more than a job title. For Shubael, and really for almost everyone back then, life was built on three pillars: his family, his faith, and the work he did to support them both. So, in 1668, he marries Hannah Wilson. And this wasn't just a personal thing, it was a community thing. He was already an established craftsman, and she came from a well-respected family. Together, they were going to build a life that would end up lasting over 50 years. And this was the result of that union. You can really see the highs and lows of colonial life right here. The joy of having children, the pride of seeing his son follow in his footsteps, and I love this detail, a double wedding for two of his daughters. But then you also see the heartbreak of losing their firstborn, Robert, which was just an all-too-common tragedy back then. In a small town like Roxbury, a skilled person had to wear a lot of different hats. This wasn't about having a side hustle. This was about survival, about how a community takes care of itself. Shubael wasn't just the wheel guy. People relied on him to survey land, to perform the somber duty of making coffins, to fix bridges, and even to help care for the poor. He was completely woven into the fabric of his town. And the thread holding everything together? It was faith. This quote tells you so much about how central the church was to their whole identity. See, becoming a full member of the church wasn't automatic. It took deep, personal soul-searching, and then a public declaration in front of everyone. It was a milestone, just as big as getting married or starting your career. So think about this. In a time before databases, or digital files, or even widespread record-keeping, how did a town remember its own history? Well, it wasn't written down in some dusty office. It was held in the minds of its oldest residents. People like Shubael. They were the living archives. 55 years. Just let that sink in for a second. When there was a land dispute in town, Shubael was called to testify about something that happened 55 years earlier when he was just 19. He was asked to remember who mowed a specific field more than half a century ago. And you know what? He remembered. And this might be the most profound thing he says in his entire memoir.
In a world with very few actual books, they were the books. Their memories weren't just sentimental stories, they were a vital public resource. They were the official record of who owned what agreements were made, the town's whole story. So, as his life story starts to wind down, Shubael shifts his focus from the past to the future. He's lived through so much wars, change, personal loss. What's the big takeaway? What's the wisdom he wants to leave behind from his 90 years on Earth? First, he talks about his greatest loss. His wife Hannah passed away in 1722, after they'd been married for 53 years. His description of what that felt like is just so simple and powerful. It's a feeling of being incomplete, like a part of him was just gone. So this is the question he tries to answer for his grandkids. After all the work, all the joys, all the sorrows, all the changes he saw, what are the core ideas that really lasted? What does he believe actually matters in the end? And here it is. 6 simple, powerful rules for a good life. There's nothing complicated here, is there? It's a blueprint built on honesty, faith, family, and community. This is his real legacy, not money or property, but a way to live. And with that, he's done. There's no big bragging about his achievements. His final request is incredibly humble. Just remember me as a guy who tried to be honest and work hard. It's a final blessing, a quiet end to a truly amazing life story. Shubael Seaver passed away the very next year. He lived for 90 years, a life that began when his town was just a tiny settlement and saw it grow into something real. A simple wheelwright from Roxbury, whose story kind of leaves us with a question, doesn't it? What are the books of history that we're writing with our own lives right now?